So now we're going to start the section on human reproduction covering the male system. So that is going to take up one more section of this, and then we will cover babies and parenting and all the rest of that separately. So how does the human reproduction cycle work for the male? Okay, so generally speaking, the male and the female are significantly different in this one thing that if you recall from the last video about the female cycle, around week 11, week 12, the female baby inside the womb makes all of the eggs that she will ever have for her lifetime. And once that's done, it's done. There's no more eggs made. And then so slowly over her lifetime, those eggs are dying out and being reabsorbed. The male sexual cycle, this is the biggest difference, is that sperm, once they begin production during puberty, sperm is produced on a constant schedule during a man's entire life. This means that a man can be fertile at 14 and he can be fertile at 99. This is why you generally see the kind of weird age discrepancies between old men and young women, because the old men are still able to have babies. You see a lot of the Hollywood and a lot of the really rich men, they go into their fourth or fifth or sixth wife and they're still making babies with them. And that is because most men remain fertile throughout their life. Although obviously near the end of their life, they're going to be less fertile than at the beginning. So most of the time, on average, the human male body takes about 12 to 13 weeks from beginning to end of creation to make a new sperm. Now, if you remember from our female section, sperm plus egg equals baby. So it takes about 12 to 13 weeks before the sperm leaves the body for it to become fully developed. Most ejaculations, which a man can do multiple ejaculations during a day, most of them contain 50 or more million sperm. 50 or more million. That's a lot of sperm. Okay? One thing you need to know is that sperm production is extremely sensitive to heat. If it gets too hot or too cold, it doesn't work, and it's very sensitive to drugs. Because of this sensitivity to heat, the human male body is designed with muscles that move the scrotum around to help keep the testes at the exact right temperature for sperm production. The testes need to be approximately 3 degrees Celsius, so approximately 6 degrees Fahrenheit, cooler than body temperature. So if the scrotum or the testes gonads themselves were inside the male body, they would actually become too hot to make any babies at all. And if they get too elongated, they get too cold, they can't make any babies, sperm at all. So on their way out, the general idea is sperm get made, and then before they get out of the body, they're gifted, if you can call it that, with a variety of chemicals, hormones, and fluids that all make up together the ejaculatory fluid. And what these things do is that it's completely designed to make a baby. That's the whole point. Because the vagina is acidic, it is anti-bacterial, right? Generally speaking, it's acidic, except for the very short window of time when a woman is fertile. At that point, the vagina becomes very different. The fluid that was previously blocking the way to the inside of the uterus becomes thin and goopy, kind of egg-like consistency, and sperm can easily swim through it. Most of the rest of the time, it's thick and hostile. It's acidic. During ovulation, the woman's body's pH changes to become more accepting. It's a higher pH technically, and its sperm find an easier time surviving in it. But the rest of the time, the vagina is very acidic, very hostile. There's also cells, immune cells in the vagina that are intentionally there to kill and destroy anything that could be coming into the vagina, which is why you need millions of sperm to make it past all of these dangers. I mean, think of it as some kind of obstacle course, right? Okay, we hit the acid bath, check. Now we made it through the defending cells, check, as they try to make their way up to a potential egg. So these include antibacterials. Did you know sperm actually has antibacterials, things that prevent bacteria from damaging the sperm? The hormones themselves that come out of the man's body actually change the inside of the woman's environment, their hormones. Also, it balances the pH of the vagina so that the sperm survive better and they're able to swim better. And there's other things that happen. One of the things that happens is that the actual cervix itself of the woman, which is generally hard and closed, the hormones that come out of the man's sperm do something to the cervix that helps soften it. And this is actually something that is used when women feel very ready to have a baby and they want to get the process going. Sex, or actually the ejaculation of male hormones into a pregnant woman's body, helps soften the cervix and get it ready for giving birth. And so that's one way a woman can get this party started if she feels done with being pregnant. It's also a reason why if a woman has a pregnancy that is perhaps not as strong, it's not as fully latched on as it should be. There's a lot of things that can endanger pregnancy. A lot of doctors will put a woman on what's called pelvic rest, which means no sex, because this is not something you want to be happening if the baby that is coming out is not ready to come out yet. Okay, so the sperm itself is actually really chock full of all this amazing stuff. You can look up more things later. Because of all of these things and because of the nature of sperm themselves, sperm can live up to 5 days inside a woman's body. So that means that sex is potentially baby making for 5 days before ovulation and about 1 to 2 days afterwards. So let's talk about that. 5 days before ovulation, if a man and a woman have sex, she's not fertile yet. The sperm stay in her body until they die and they're cleared away by her immune system. If one of those 50 million sperm manages to suck it up and stay around inside this hostile environment long enough, when the egg does get released 5 days later, it's sitting there waiting like, hey, I've been waiting for you forever. Where have you been, right? And then the egg and sperm can unite and then you have a baby. One thing to note that I don't have on this slide is that it seems, although this is not 100%, like cold hard fact, this is the way it is. We're talking generalities here. 50 million sperm. If you remember much about your human bio, half of those sperm come out with the XX or with an X chromosome and half come out with a Y. Now the egg of a woman is X period. There's no Y's because she's a woman. So she's an XX, and when her genome split in two and create two different possible babies, each of those are going to be X. The sperm itself is either an X or a Y. Now, if it's an X sperm, it's only carrying X genomes, then when it unites with the X egg, it will create an XX individual, which is a girl. If it's a Y genome sperm and it unites with a X egg, which again, there's only X eggs, then it will become a male human baby. And one thing they've discovered is that it seems to be that the X sperm are slower, but they're like the turtle and the hare. They're the turtle. They're slower, but they last longer. So if, for example, a man and a woman have sex 5 days before ovulation, and then they don't have sex again, when the egg comes out, chances are that the only sperm that are going to be left around to fertilize it are the X sperm, the girls. So if you have a sex a large number of days out from ovulation, chances are, not 100% because we're talking 50 million here, chances are you will have a girl baby. However, because XY, human males, Y chromosome sperm tend to be faster, if you have sex the day of ovulation, the day the egg pops out and is ready to be fertilized, the Y sperm tend to be faster. They'll get there first and they'll make a XY baby a boy. So generally speaking, if you have sex several days before ovulation, you end up with a girl baby. If you have sex the day of ovulation, you have a boy. Generally speaking. This is the only real way to try to determine the gender of the baby is by the date that you have sex. So sex is baby making for 5 days before ovulation, about 1 to 2 days afterwards. That's because even if the egg and the sperm unite 3 or 4 or 5 days after ovulation, remember the egg is still there, the zygote will not have enough time to develop to the point where it needs to be in order to implant. So you will have a fertilized egg get released with the menstruation fluid during the period. And that is why you can have a fertilized egg that actually gets lost during menstruation. So let's talk about the physical aspects. So the male gonad is the testes, and the testes are held inside the scrotum sac. There's two of them. They're called the balls, right? Two testicles holding the testes inside the scrotum sac. It's outside the man's body so that the sperm can be made in a cooler environment. You have your penis, which is attached. It's not a muscle, it's spongy tissue, which is attached inside the man's body. Then you have your rectum coming down from the descending colon, which goes out, of course, to the man's elimination hole. You have your male bladder. You've got several glands, a really big gland called the prostate gland, if you've ever heard of prostate cancer. The prostate gland goes around the urethra, which comes down from the bladder out through the penis so that your pee goes out through your penis. And your prostate gland is responsible for some of those chemicals that get added to ejaculation. You also have seminal vesicles. So this is a little bit more complicated. And if you look here, you can see that the prostate gland is surrounding the urethra. This is the bladder. And then you have your urethra, which comes down through the bladder. It's the tube that carries pee out through the tip of the penis. And the prostate gland is around the urethra. This is why if the prostate gland begins to enlarge, which happens during prostate cancer, then one of the first signs is that men have trouble peeing, or they feel like they have to pee all the time. It's because the prostate gland, as it gets bigger, it pinches off the urethra, and that's a problem. You have Cowper's gland here, you have seminal vesicles up here. All of these are there to add little parts of this ejaculatory fluid. Okay, now you have your testes here, your epididymis, your vas deferens. Your vas deferens is what carries the sperm up, 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 over top of the bladder, and then down, 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 until it gets shunted into the urethra area so that it can go out of the penis, just like the pee does. So what's happening inside the testes? Now this is really complicated and we are not going to go into great amounts of detail here. But you need to know that there's various areas of the testes that are in charge of what's going to be happening to the sperm. And so let's go into the details of what's going on there. So sperm make their home, their beginning little section of life in the seminiferous tubules. That's going to be in the main body of the testes. And they're chock full of these fun little seminiferous tubules. So that's where sperms start out. As they continue their path to maturity, they get shunted down these tubes into the head of the epididymis. And then as they work their way through the little tubes of the epididymis, at the bottom of the epididymis, it goes back up to all the way at the top, and then they reach the vas deferens, and they go up into the body in order to be released. And so this is where we talked about that 10 to 12 weeks of time. It takes quite a while for a sperm to start out here and make its way all the way down and then up. And that's why it takes so much time. If you'll notice that there are blood vessels that are coming down into the testes inside the scrotum, that is so that all of these sperm production is happening with plenty of blood, oxygen, everything that the sperm need. And also there are, although you can't see it in this picture, there are tendons that are connected to the testes that pull the testes up closer to the body during times of cold. And so if a man gets suddenly cold, one of the things that happens is his testes tuck themselves up against his body as snugly as they can. And if he's hot, then they hang loose and they kind of waddle back and forth, I guess. I don't know. Not a man. Um, so what happens during sperm creation? As I mentioned earlier, sperm are either an X or a Y. So spermatocytes begin life as diploid. Okay, so that means they have 46 chromosomes. They're a copy of the man himself who's making them. And so he's got 46 chromosomes, they've got 46 chromosomes. However, partway through the process, they undergo meiotic division. What that means is that eventually 4 spermatids, which are haploid cells, they're not double, they're single haploid cells with 23 chromosomes. So they double and then they split in half, and so eventually you have 4 spermatids, and they each have half of the chromosomes of the adult male making it. That means they're either going to have an X or a Y. Now this is where the spermatid is ready genetically to go. It's all the genetic change that's going to happen has happened. At this point, they are given their tails and they're released into the center of the seminiferous tubule. Once this happens, once a spermatid has a tail, it's become a sperm. And they start swimming their little way through the seminiferous tubules into the epididymis, and they begin to mature. Lots of things happen, very complicated. We don't need to get into that. Here's a picture of it, starting with the spermatid as they, again, don't need to get into all of it, as they grow and mature. All of these things happen, and then you have a number 7, you have your final, complete, fully mature sperm. It has a head, a midpiece, and a tail. The head is where the genetic information is kept, obviously not in the tail. The tail is just there to move it. So here at the bottom is a cross section of a seminiferous tubule where all of this magic happens. Okay, so you have the round thing starting at the outside, the closest to the outside of the tubule, and then as the sperm starts maturing, it moves towards the center. This is the hollow center where the sperm, once they get old enough and big enough and they graduate, they get released into the inside of the tubule, along with all the other millions of sperm who are reaching this. And all of these things are happening through a very complex hormonal cycle. If you'll notice right here in the upper corner, you'll see FSH, LH, testosterone, you see the anterior pituitary mentioned. All of these hormones, these are the same hormones that are happening in women. However, follicle stimulating hormone Instead of in a woman creating the follicle to burst open an egg, it creates the sperm. So it's the same hormone, just like the luteinizing hormone, same hormone working with testosterone in order to create sperm. So that's why the human body is very efficient. In one gendered person, an XY, you can take the same hormone and create a completely different process as in an XX individual. They react differently, but it's the same efficient hormones that